For the first time since seizing power in Afghanistan last August, the Taliban has reopened some public universities and allowed some female students to attend. The militants say women must remain segregated from their male counterparts in line with their interpretation of Sharia law and can only study subjects approved by the Taliban. The international community has made equal access to education for women one of the conditions of unfreezing Afghanistan's assets overseas. Now, some members of the Taliban say the move shows they have now fulfilled this condition and that the US should lift any sanctions against them.
We have provided complete security. We have respected the rights of women. A woman was appointed as the head of Malalai's maternity hospital just a few days ago. Schools are open and universities are opening, and now the United Nations and the United States have no excuse to continue sanctions against us.
Right, let's get more on this from Dr. Elinor Zaino. She's director of the Southwest Asia Regional Program at the German think tank, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Dr. Zaino, welcome. You just heard one Taliban governor there. Is this reopening of some universities for some women just a Taliban ploy to get access to international funds, do you think?
Well, we have to understand that the Taliban never officially prohibited girls or women education and not even women to go to work. They have even proclaimed that during the whole Doha peace process that women and girls can go to school and work. But they put their conditions, and I think they make conditions quite difficult and sometimes quite vague. So to give you one example, they put the condition of gender separation. But they can always argue that the situation and the conditions are not yet there to let women go to school. So I think we have to take the Taliban by their words and proceed from there.
But do we really need to take the Taliban by their words? Because just based on the words, as you pointed out, they are in favor of educating women and girls, but the conditions that exist in Afghanistan, or at least under them, imply that women and girls can't get education. We are talking of universities only in 6 out of 34 provinces, and we haven't really seen any plan to make education available for women. So should we really be taking the Taliban on their words?
I wouldn't say the Taliban are in favor of girls' education. Definitely, they have a strong resentments against that or strong objections against that. But we have to counter the Taliban also by religious arguments because they act on conviction. And so there is no religious argumentation against women education. And that's why we should take them by their words, because that's the way how they argue. But on the other hand, of course, we can use the whole diplomatic toolkits that we have. We can try with political conditions, we can try with economic pressure, but I think the Taliban will not be much pressured by the other means. So we should try also this kind of dialogue or talks and negotiations on that.
But how far will that get, given that the Taliban are convinced, essentially, that women, in many ways, are inferior to men, have a second-class place in society, and education for them is perhaps not at par with education for men?
We have to stay very realistic. And I think now we have to work with the new reality that we have seen. And unfortunately, the Taliban are the new reality, if we like it or not. And I see the only way forward to at least to negotiate some minimum standards, some minimum guarantees for women is to proceed that way, to keep the channels open and demanding concessions and taking them by their words. Because I don't see there's no military option there on the table anymore and also not in the future. And economically, politically, yes, maybe we can put pressure on them. But we have to play it very wisely.
Do you think international funds that have been frozen should be released to the Taliban?
At least, I mean, from my perspectives, I think, yes, we have to release certain amounts, and that has already happened to decrease the humanitarian crisis. But I think we have to play it very wisely and not release them all of a sudden, because it's the only asset that we have in our hands. And the Taliban they know, they are also pragmatic, and they know to survive, they would need some kind of international donors to survive also economically and politically in the future.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Elinor Zeno from the German think tank, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
And in addition to education for women, the Taliban also promised security for Afghans. But fundamentalist outfits like the Islamic State are putting that promise to the test on a daily basis.
Fear hangs over the eastern Afghan city of Jalalabad. As night falls, inhabitants rush to get home before the shooting starts. Once a fringe fundamentalist group, Islamic State has stepped up attacks across Afghanistan since the Taliban took control of the country last year, especially in Nangarhar province. The Taliban are checking vehicles in the trading hub. The Taliban are playing down the threat of the group, also known as Daesh. Daesh does not exist. It doesn't exist because it does not have a base or a place here to declare its government. Not even a single piece of land in Afghanistan is under their control. In the streets of Jalalabad, Taliban fighters tell of regular attacks. Analysts estimate there have been nearly 100 attacks since mid-September, nearly all attacking the Taliban. The bloodiest was a suicide bomb blast at Kabul airport in August, as tens of thousands of Afghans tried to evacuate. Over 200 people were killed in the attack, including 13 US service members. Islamic State are believed to have about 2,000 to 4,000 fighters in Afghanistan, compared to 80,000 Taliban.
Say that the violence against Taliban has been on the rise, but exactly how much is ISKP responsible for that remains, it's difficult to say.
The chief ideological difference between the two Islamist groups is that the Taliban wanted an Afghanistan free of foreign forces. IS wants an Islamic caliphate stretching from Turkey to Pakistan and beyond. Suspected Taliban reprisals have seen dozens of corpses showing up mysteriously. A number of bodies were found last month along a canal in Jalalabad. The UN accuses the Taliban of secretly eliminating 50 suspected IS members in Nangarhar. Nangarhar is a stronghold for the Salafist community, a fundamentalist branch of Sunni Islam.
The Taliban have responded quite by targeting the Salafist community in Afghanistan, and they continue to do that. And that has not only stoked fear within the Salafist community, but potentially could also drive disenfranchised Salafists to join the ranks of IS.
But so pervasive is the culture of fear in Jalalabad that no one dares to speak out about the reprisals.
And for more on this, I'm joined by correspondent Ali Latifi in Istanbul. Ali, how serious is the threat posed by Islamic State Khorasan to the Taliban?
The biggest threat to the Taliban is really in terms of their PR apparatus, right? Because the one thing that the Taliban said that when they come to power that they can deliver will be peace and order. And what we've seen is the opposite of that. We've seen that, crime hasn't necessarily gone down. And most importantly, attacks claimed by the so-called Islamic State have not ended at all. In a lot of ways, they've gotten worse. They've spread out across the country. They've attacked areas in Kunduz and Kandahar and places that normally they wouldn't have attacked. So really, now it's up to the Taliban to prove that they can finally deliver the safety and security that they've been promising all these years, and that they can basically not end up in the same situation as the Republic, which was unable to really hold back an insurgency or a terrorist network. However, you saw the Taliban in the past and really actually provide security. Now it's up to them to deliver on this promise.
It's interesting you talked about a threat to the PR apparatus of the Taliban, because we just played a report in which a Taliban official claimed Islamic State doesn't exist in Afghanistan. I wonder, therefore, if that's the Taliban's way of saying they don't know how to deal with the threat from the group.
It's hilarious because that is the exact statement the former government made in 2018 or 19. They made very similar statements saying that they have completely eradicated the so-called Islamic State, and then for years after that, they continued to stage attacks in Kabul, in Jalalabad, in other cities. So it's funny because it seems like they're operating off the same playbook as the former republic in that way.
Where does that leave the people of Afghanistan, Ali? I mean, how assured can they be, especially in places like Jalalabad, that a Taliban government can provide them security?
Well, if you look at it, for instance, the city of Jalalabad is currently considered one of the least safe in the country, in part because of, mafias and crime networks and things like that, but also specifically because of the threat posed by the so-called Islamic State, because it has always been the city of Jalalabad has always been one of their primary targets, and it's continued to this day. Those attacks are not letting up, and there are still reports of fighting between the two groups in and around Jalalabad. So it's not helping, as I said, the number one thing, when I was still in the Emirate, I remember I was talking to a Talib official and he's like, look, we've delivered peace and we've delivered security and order to you. And I said, well, no, you haven't, because look at what happened at the airport right before, the end of the occupation, the end of the withdrawal, when, the so-called Islamic State claimed a massive attack, on the outside perimeter of the airport where thousands of people were waiting. And they blamed that on the U.S., saying the U.S. failed in their security efforts and that wasn't us. But then after that, we saw attacks in Kunduz, we saw attacks in Kandahar, we saw attacks in Kabul, we saw attacks and fighting in Jalalabad and Mazar and other cities. So they really have yet to deliver on that primary promise.
Ali Latifi reporting from Istanbul there.